All right, well, let's go ahead and get underway. We are looking at the book of Revelation. We're going to be talking about the sea beast this morning, the sea beast with blasphemy. And that starts in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. I can tell you this is probably one of the most, if not the most difficult chapter in the book of Revelation. And I'm just trying to look through to see what else I can find that looks harder than this one. And it's probably a toss-up between Revelation 13 and Revelation 16, all because of trying to figure out, the details regarding the beasts that we see here. And I'm in a state of flux, to be quite honest with you, in terms of how I'm interpreting at least part of this chapter. Because there's some things I'm seeing, and there's some things that I think I'm seeing, so I'm not really sure. But anyway, we'll go for it. Good morning, Richard. All right, so in chapter 12, we talked about the fiery red dragon that had the 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. Now, it's important, I think, as we look at this, that we pay a little bit of some careful attention to the description of the beasts in Revelation chapter 12 versus chapter 13, because there is just a slight difference in that description, but maybe that is suggesting something to us. I can't say for sure, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I want to have some time to really check that out, but just to introduce it. Now, Eric says it's a 2-headed monster of Rome and Israel. Let me ask you something, Eric, since you are suggesting that. When you look at Revelation 13, you're saying that this is a 2-headed monster within this beast in chapter 13 that represents both Rome and Israel. Is that your viewpoint, your position on that? You can, type a yes or a no in the description. And so, okay, so Eric says the sea beast is Rome, and that is a common view, and I'm kind of tossing that up as well. We're going to look at it. I might look at it over the next 2 weeks and see if I change my mind one way or the other on what I think it is. Now, in chapter 13, of course, we have this beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now, did you notice that this was slightly a different description of the beast in chapter 13 compared with what we had in chapter 12? So with the dragon. So let me read it one more time just so you pay attention to it. In Revelation 12:3, it says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads." Then in 13:1, it says, "I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name." So you can at least see that the description is different with the crowns on the heads, 7 heads in Revelation 13 for the dragon, and with the crowns on the horns in Revelation 13 and verse 1. I might have said 13, but I meant chapter 12 with the 7 heads, verse 3, and then in chapter 13 with the 10 horns and the crowns on the 10 horns. So that's one distinction that I noticed just looking at the text and trying to figure out what's going on. And welcome from South Africa as well. And then you can see some differences. The beast or the dragon in Revelation 12 is found in heaven to begin with. And then in Revelation 13:1, this beast rises out of the sea and is receiving authority from the beast or the dragon in Revelation 12. Now, Eric may have spent some time, and I didn't get a chance to even check your book this week, Eric, but he thinks that the two horns of the land beast are the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, that's the first time I've heard that. I definitely will go back and look at that because it's rather interesting. And I know there's some other views on this which suggest that we're dealing with, some of the rulers in Israel, between Rome and between Herod, et cetera. And even, dealing with the rulers and authority in Jerusalem. And so, yes, that is correct. The sea beast gives the land beast its authority. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and, talk some more about what we have in front of us in the text. And so it says that on his horns there were 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now, the language of this beast is certainly out of Daniel chapter 7. And in verse 2, it says, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority." So what we see there is this correlation with the beast in Daniel chapter 7 in terms of how it looks. So we're going to go to Daniel chapter 7, talk about that a little bit, and see what kind of information we can bring. True, the beasts are, some type of ruling authorities. There's no question about that. In the 7th chapter of Daniel, that chapter opens with the vision that Daniel sees of beasts rising out of the sea as well, or at least appearing to do so. In verse 1, it says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." That would be the Mediterranean Sea. "And four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other." And of course, most references will refer you right back to Revelation 13 and Revelation 17. Now, the first was like a lion. So you can see that, of course, it's in reverse order in Revelation 13. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear, it was raised up, and on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and they said, Thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, I want to stop for a moment and just talk about those, because the text indicates something about them that we just want to at least mentally note for the moment before we move forward. But these are the same description that we have in Revelation 13 and verse 2. As I said, they're in reverse order. Now, in Daniel, we know that this refers to the kingdom of Babylon, to Nebuchadnezzar. It refers to the Medo-Persians and also to Greece. So those are the 3 ruling kingdoms that you have. And it's also important to note that they were Gentile kingdoms as well. So Babylon, Persia, and Greece that we have in those examples. And then we have a 4th beast that is different from the rest. It says in verse 7, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, this beast is different. It's the fourth beast. It has these iron teeth, and it is devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. Let's see what Shauna Dene says. Doesn't that bring together the talk about the one world order, with the man being at the head, being different layers of people under him? Well, they may have been talking about a one world order in the first century, but it has nothing to do with this one world order that people are talking about today. These passages are referring to something that's historical. From the perspective, as we said before, you had Babylon, the ancient kingdom of Babylon, of which Nebuchadnezzar was the ruler, and then you had the Medo-Persians with Darius and Cyrus, and then following that was the Grecian Empire with Alexander the Great, and then following the breakup of his empire, which in chapter 8 you will see where that broke up into four rulers. Then you had the Roman Empire, and I believe that's what's being dealt with or mentioned in chapter 7 of Daniel in verse 7. And so all of this, as Deb stated, is fulfilled in the time of the Old Covenant. The Old Covenant marks the end period of these beasts and their activity, and that's going to be evident even when we look in Revelation, that there was a definite or defined period of time for the existence of these beasts in terms of the scheme of redemption and the fulfillment of Bible prophecy that took place. And the problem that we have today with modern eschatology is that they look at these things, and based on, you know, a lot of what they've heard in the news, a lot of what they've seen on television with these so-called end-time prophecy preachers and teachers, they look for things that are occurring in the natural realm or in our world today to ascribe and impose on Bible prophecy. So we are in the new covenant with the Lord. Yes, we are in the new covenant. And the old covenant ended in 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. And that's when the Bible says all things were fulfilled. You can read that in Luke 21, verses 20 through 22. I'll quote it here. And we appreciate your question. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. That's Luke 21 and verse 20. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her, for these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. And then in verse 31 and 32, he tells the apostles, so likewise, when you see all these things come to pass, know that the kingdom of God has drawn near. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. So those things were fulfilled in the first century, and we are now in the new covenant, the covenant of grace. We're in what the Bible then called the age to come, but that age has now come. We're no longer in what the Bible called the present evil age or the age of Moses, for that matter. That's what was being destroyed at the time of the temple. Now, so when we look at these things, we shouldn't be looking at them as something forming and coming about in the world today. There are lots of wars and things that are going on, and we right now are appearing to enter in some rather treacherous times for the world, or at least around the world. But nevertheless, they have nothing whatsoever to do with the fulfillment of Bible prophecy that we see in either the Old or the New Testament. Now, in verse 7, as we were saying, this appears to refer to Rome. And in verse 8, there's another element that comes into play. A lot of people try to fuse them together, but I don't. I see this as two separate entities taking place in verse 8. And I'll read it to you and explain to you why I hold that view. In verse 8, he says, I was considering the horns. Now, he had seen 4 beasts come up. And of course, later on, he will tell you that these were 4 kings. And verse 17, because he says, those great beasts, which are 4 kings, and kings can refer to horns. You can see that back in, or at least in chapter 8, that he will tell you that these horns are kings. So when he says kings, he's referring to horns. But nevertheless, as we read verses 3 through 7 or 2 through 7, they're talking about 4 horns of 4 kingdoms. Now, he says, I was considering the horns, and I take that to be the 4 horns based on what I just said. And there was another horn, or the other thing that he could have been doing was looking at the 4th beast that had the 10 horns. And I'm okay with either way to interpret that. And it could be very likely, since he's dealing with some things that are happening chronologically at the time, that now the time is when the 4th beast has come on the scene that has the 10 horns, and therefore he's considering these 10 horns, and that's fine. Let me read another comment here. Okay, the lights came on for me. Hold on a second, somebody just popped up. All right, the lights came on for me in 2019, so I am like a babe trying to relearn the old that has been taught to me for years. And that's fine. We appreciate you very, very much. Just don't lose your patience. Just stay patient, stay consistent, and continue to study. And I'm sure that you will grasp, the understanding and get up to snuff in little time. There's so much good material available for you today, and you can learn very quickly, or just pace yourself at a comfortable pace for you. And so he's saying, I was considering the horns, and like I said, that could be the 10 horns, and I'm okay with that. And there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. And so the reason I think the 10 horns will fit more so is because of the next statement where he says, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. So at the time that the 4th beast comes on the scene, and the little horn that comes up among them, the first 3 horns have been plucked up. They no longer exist. And if you look at that in history, you will see that Babylon came as a kingdom. It fell to the Medes and Persians. Medes and Persian kingdom fell to Greece, and then eventually Greece fell to Rome. So those 3 had been destroyed, but Rome is still existing at the time of this prophecy. And that's another way, Shauna, to understand the historical framework, is to understand that at the time these beasts are coming up, Rome is in power. And that's ancient Rome. You see, when people try to make it fit today, what they do is they talk about a regurgitation of Rome, that Rome has to be reestablished, or they try to assign Rome to the European Union or some other modern day conglomerate of countries in order to make up a 10-horned beast. At one time, they were calling the European Union that because I think they had 10 countries that were formed, and then they grew to 25 countries. And that didn't fit the prophecy. So you're just not going to make anything in today's time to fit that. But this was during the time that ancient Rome was in existence, and that's very, very evident from the prophecies of Daniel. It's also telling us that Daniel was that the prophecies in Daniel are being referred to in the book of Revelation. And that would suggest to you that Daniel's prophecies are not just or relating to those things that were taking place in the time of of Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. And so from that perspective, we can't just ascribe it to the Maccabean period, as some people try to do, Daniel. Because these prophecies are shown in the book of Revelation, that's way beyond that period of 167 BC, etc. And so it is not a reference to that time, but these things are being focused on for what the Bible calls the time of the end. And that was looking at the end of the age, or what was called the last days. So I was considering the horns. These are these 10 horns. And there was another horn, the little one, coming up among them, among those 10, before whom 3 of the first horns, that would be Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, were plucked out by the roots. That's why it calls them 3 of the first horns. Now, some people, and I think this is a mistake that people make, they will say that 3 of the 10 horns were plucked out by the roots. Well, if you have 10, and we all can do simple math, if you have 10, I'll put up 2 hands. I don't know whether you can see them. If you put up 10 and you take away what? 3, that only leaves 7 plus the 1. That doesn't make sense. Here's one thing to remember. The beast always has 10 horns. It never loses any of its horns, either in Daniel or in the book of Revelation. So we don't have a 7-horned beast anywhere in the prophecy. It's always a 10-horned beast. So that means that there was another horn that came up among them. Now, another error that they make, besides subtracting 3 horns from the 10, is they add the 1 to the 10 and make an 11-horned beast. You don't find that anywhere in Scripture. This is just a little horn that comes up among the 10. So it's 11 horns when you count them from that way, but it's really only one beast that has 10 horns and the little horn. So you're only dealing with basically 2 entities. The 4th beast, which is one entity that just happens to have 10 horns, and then you have the little horn. All right. So notice, it also says, and there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man. Now that's talking about the little horn. And a mouth speaking pompous words. Now the identity of the little horn can be determined as we look further into chapter 7. I'm trying to see where my time schedule is, and I know we kind of slowed down a little bit because of questions. So let's see if we can determine a little bit about the little horn to begin to identify him, and we'll have to pick up on next week. But let's notice something as we're moving in that direction. One, this takes us all the way to the time of the great white throne judgment. And it is at that point where the beast is destroyed and its body given to the burning flame. And then, of course, it talks about, in connection with that, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds. So that would be the coming of Christ. All right. That's all in the vision part of Daniel 7. The explanation of Daniel 7 begins in verse 15. And so sometimes we try to interpret a lot in verse 14, but that's the part that gave Daniel the headache. So it's in the latter part that we get inspired interpretation of what this was all about. And so watch, just read a couple of things. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Now watch what he says. Those great beasts which are four, not 11, not 7, not 10. It was only four great beasts, which are four kings. And as I mentioned before, kings can be spoken of as horns. And he says, which arise out of the earth. Now, verse 18, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Now, the saints are not the four beasts, nor are they the little horn, and we'll see that as well. So in verse 19, once he makes this statement about the saints receiving the kingdom, he says, then I wish to know the truth about the fourth beast. So that's where his attention is focused, which was different from all the others. In other words, it wasn't a lion, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a leopard. It was a fourth beast that had huge iron teeth, etc., with the 10 horns. And so he says, the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devour it, broke in pieces, and trample the residue with its feet. And the 10 horns that were on its head. So the 10 horns were on the head of the fourth beast. So that's a composite beast. And then, now watch, and the other horn, which came up, before whom 3 fell. Now, this is a very important point as well. And I hate to even stop here. Because this little horn is not an individual, but it's an entity that has been in existence for the entire duration of the first 3 horns. Because it was in the presence of the little horn that 3 of the first horns fell. How are you, Carl and Amos, Demetrius? I know I missed a name or two, but that's the point. So 3 of the first horns fell in the presence of the little horn. Now, if these are kingdoms, then the little horn can't be an individual in this text. From my perspective, it has to represent another kingdom. It's a little horn by way of comparison and has different features. It has eyes like a man, and intelligence, etc., which indicate intelligence. You know, it has a mouth speaking pompous things. So it's different from that perspective. Now, we will end in verses 21 and 22, and then we'll pick up here, and then we'll move back to chapter 13 on next week. But he says, the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints. Now, that's what you have in the book of Revelation. You have some entity warring against the saints, persecuting the saints. So this horn is making war against the saints and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. So this persecution, this war goes on until the coming of the Ancient of Days and judgment. And at the time of judgment, that's when the kingdom is turned over to the saints. Now, here's one last point I will make, and that is, when you look in the book of Revelation, the beast was only allowed to continue for 42 months. That's a very short period of time in the vision. It's 1,260 days, or about 3.5 years. Now, Carl says it's not another kingdom. You can type in, Carl, what you think it is, and I will consider it. I will look at it. And then let's look at Shauna's comment before we close for this morning. I would like to talk to you about my visions the Lord has given me since awakening. I can't interpret them myself, one being in the highmost church, and seeing people from every land, sitting in a circle with a throne they circled around. I could never see who was in the throne. I only got to say with them like I was being accepted, if possible, my email. All right, I have your email. I will contact you, and we will discuss that. And she says she has many things to discuss and learn, etc. So we will take a look at that. All right. Now, the Jews persecuted the Christian people. That is correct. So there's no question about who did the persecuting in the New Testament. There is no question that they were a kingdom, because the Bible says that the kingdom was taken away from them and given to another nation. And of course, they had a ruler among them. And we will look at that. So that's incorporated. So when you talk about a king, Carl, that's a king is nothing without a kingdom. He has to have subjects. He has to have a law. He has to have territory. And so from that perspective, I have no problem with it being a king, but a king is not on an island by himself. He is a king. He is someone who has a nation. All right. And so from that, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being here this morning, for your participation. If any of you want to learn more in these and other studies, because 30 minutes is not enough time to teach everything, we have some recorded studies that are available to you and others that we are making. You can go to this link I'm going to type in, which is allthingsfulfilled.com /subscribe. And all you have to do is just enter your name and email address. All things fulfill. I can't talk and type. fulfill.com /subscribe. Click that link. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, which is free, you can do that, and you'll start immediately receiving messages in your inbox on a weekly basis. And you can study with those and from time to time interact with us. Well, we encourage everyone to share the message this morning. Share the link, especially, so that other people have an opportunity to hear. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Christian friends, have a great Sunday morning. Peace and blessings to you all. Thank you for watching.